Hey everyone! October has already begun, and you know what that means. Yes, it's time to delve into some spooky, scary games all month long. To kick things off, I have chosen Clock Tower for the PlayStation 1 to start us with. Back in its day, people were very mixed in their reception of it. Some loved the atmosphere and jump scares revolving around the infamous Scissor Man, but others were less than pleased, citing all kinds of issues from its gameplay mechanics to unfairly confusing puzzles. If you live in the US, you may be forgiven for thinking that this is the first title in the Clock Tower series of games based on the, name here. But as it turns out, this was in fact the second. Yes, the original Clock Tower was released exclusively for the Super Famicom in 1995, meaning no one outside of Japan would get to play it, sadly. It even got an updated version for the PlayStation 1 in 1997, but sadly that also never reached us. 1 year before that, this sequel, called Clock Tower 2 in Japan, would hit the shelves and try to expand on the story from the original. We would receive it the following year. It kept a cult following over the years, bringing us to this point right now. So let's not waste any more time and find out how well Clock Tower for the PlayStation 1 holds up today. For those who don't know, the Clock Tower games, with the exception of 3, are actually a series of point-and-click adventure games, something you wouldn't typically think to associate with survival horror, at least not these days, as the first Resident Evil also came out in 1996. Pretty much stealing all the thunder from this sequel. Poor Scissor Man. Luckily, you don't need to play the original in order to follow what's happening here, as the game does a pretty good job of catching you up to speed. A year after the original game, and after the main protagonist, Jennifer Simpson, put a stop to the original Scissor Man, new murders have been reported, with the killer matching Scissor Man's description. Jennifer and her new adopted guardian, Helen Maxwell, work with police, researchers, and other characters to solve the mystery of Scissor Man's return. They also have to survive. So begins a story told in 3 main chapters, with prologues and interlude sequences to help move the plot along. Each main stage revolves around you being trapped in a location with Scissor Man and trying to get out, while also uncovering the secrets behind the murder mystery. The interlude stages are meant to be breaks taken in between all the chaos, with updates to the main story and interactions with various characters. After this, it's back into the fray, rinse and repeat. This was the first game in the series to make the transition into 3D, and it admittedly could have been better, even for its time. Character models look very stiff and bland, with FMV cutscenes that somehow look even worse. He is staring into my soul! The voice acting isn't any better. While I wouldn't necessarily put it with the likes of House of the Dead 2 for best worst voices, seriously, that's in a league all of its own, it's still pretty up there.
He told me that if I kidnap you, he will give you to me.
Your controls are typical for a point-and-click style game, but that's part of what makes this so odd, as I doubt anyone ever envisioned the PlayStation controller being used for a game like this. There was an official mouse accessory released for the PS1, but I doubt many people were going out to buy it just for games like this. That said, the original Super Famicom game also did this, so I can't be too critical. While exploring rooms, you can click anywhere on the screen to make your character walk toward it, or click on items, doors, buttons, switches, etc. to make the character interact with it. You can also move your pointer up top to select any key items you previously picked up and use them to solve puzzles or save yourself from danger. So, the danger. Here's where things get interesting. So throughout each main stage, Scissor Man is lurking around and can appear in just about any place at any time, significantly increasing the tension when you try to solve puzzles and move forward. Once he's on your tail, you have to react quickly. Depending on where you are, you may be able to either find a hiding spot or an item you can use to temporarily stun him or knock him over. It's also possible to dodge his attacks by mashing the square button, called the panic button here, but you can only use this a few times before getting worn out and being at the mercy of Scissor Man's next assault. You can never stop him completely, nor can you ever predict where he's going to come from outside of those moments where you start to hear the creepy music building up. One of the most interesting things about this setup is that you will never have the same experience twice with this game. Due to the random nature of Scissor Man's appearances, it's impossible to be completely sure of when he'll strike next, nor if you'll have enough of a strategy to deal with him when the time comes. Even more interesting and scary is the fact that your hiding places won't always work, especially if you're reusing the same place twice. When I had played this game for the first time, I had assumed Scissorman would automatically walk away if you managed to reach one of the hiding places in time. Boy was I shocked when he saw right through it and killed my character on the spot. So wait, this game is actually scary? Surprisingly, yes! Music and sound play a big part in not only building up the tension, but in scaring the ever-living bejesus out of you. Yes, even with the outdated graphics and hilariously bad voice acting, the sound still manages to make you feel uneasy with the loud clanking of the scissors and other effects. Combine this with the uncertainty about where Scissorman will appear, the inability to do much fighting back, making you feel generally helpless, as most great horror games do, and Scissorman's ability to eventually see through your hiding places, and you've got a surprisingly tense little scenario to get out of. I also noticed other little surprising moments made possible by the game's choice of cinematic camera angles depending on the scene. Here you can see me as Helen running toward a lift. Instead of simply having me enter it, the game decided to show this little pulse-pounding scene instead. Much more intense, right? I wish I could say everything else about the game worked out this well, but unfortunately I just don't feel that way. Right from the beginning, you're given pretty vague instructions on how the game's progression system will work. For example, are you choosing to play as Jennifer or Helen in the first scenario? Then you'd better know that it's determined by whether you talk to Harris once or twice in the prologue chapter. What? You didn't? Oh well! Way too many important moments in the game were determined by small and unpredictable things such as this, making me simply shrug as I tried to go the paths I wanted to. Some sections of the game will also be determined by a little luck, which, while scary to a degree, is really just annoying. Thankfully, you can save anywhere at least, though it will start you off from whatever room you just entered before the save, even if you saved after completing some actions in it. Some puzzles also get a little complicated, particularly in the final stage of the game. I don't want to tell you how long it took me to spot this teeny switch on this side of the wall that clearly had no business being there. Getting the best endings, which are mostly determined by your actions in this last stage, leave you with a lot to figure out, and a lot less places to run and hide. It wasn't impossible to work out, but it definitely took a lot of guesswork, as well as consistent trial and error. Combined with the slow pacing of most cutscenes and the slow-scrolling dialogue, there was certainly enough frustration to go around. The game is, in general, pretty short. Confusing puzzles aside, most first-time playthroughs will take about 2 to 2.5 hours, depending on how quickly you figure things out. With that said, each character, both Jennifer and Helen, have 5 endings among the 2 of them, with A being the best and E being the worst. This made me want to go back and play it at least twice in order to see all of the scenarios I missed out on in my first playthrough. The story was certainly compelling enough, even if a little ridiculous in places. It's also pretty widely accepted among fans that none of the Clock Tower sequels were considered to be better than the original Super Famicom game. I think it's safe to say I agree with that statement, as the original did have something special to it that none of the other games could quite emulate. Still, this was a bold attempt to bring the series into 3D, and the enhanced camera angles did at least make for some great jump scares and moments of tension, which I will always cherish. So this one is a bit of a hard game to recommend. That's not to say it won't have an audience, but there's a very specific niche you have to be a part of in order to accept it. Do you enjoy survival horror games? Are you okay with a point-and-click adventure game on a system that wasn't really designed for point-and-click adventure games? Do you get a kick out of bad English dubbing? Are you willing to set all the flaws aside in order to enjoy what good things the game does have to offer? If you've said yes to maybe 3 or more of those things, then I'd say yes, give it a shot. But know what you're getting yourself into. Personally, I did find the journey to be worthwhile, even despite the frustrations, but I know that not everyone else is me, however, and I hope that the info I've provided here will be able to give you a proper idea of whether it's worth delving into or not, especially with the high resale cost that it's currently going for. And that's going to do it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts on this game in the comments below, and look forward to more spooky, scary game videos coming up all this month. And I will see you all next time.